3 bolts on the front down here. Let's look at the state of mine, and the actual chassis is okay. You can see there's a bolt at the back, one in the middle, and there's one on the end here. So obviously had a bit of hard driving and off-road. And this is the bottom of the fuel tank that's dropped down after you take those bolts out. So I've put a bucket underneath just to catch the fuel tank, so I'm doing this on my own. And then at the back of the fuel tank there's just one big bolt, and that was totally gunked on, undersealed, so I had to put a spanner on the top and a ratchet on the bottom, but I had to use a bar, so I'm using my my jack from my Defender to give me a bit of extra leverage to get that going, but it's come loose now. So this is about to drop down, so I'm going to stop recording, so I'm on my own, and I'll show you it in a second, the state of the 2 fuel tanks. So there you go, I've taken the 3 bolts off the front and the large bolt off the back and disconnected the cables, or fuel line and the electrical cable. Because I'm doing this on my own, what I had to do was put a bucket underneath the fuel tank to take most of the weight, because I've still actually got fuel in it, but I don't really want to use that fuel. I don't want to empty it on my driveway at least. So I'm dropping it with the fuel in it, which is probably the rookie way of doing it. It dropped onto the bucket, and then because I'm on my own, I held it from the top side here. It's just got enough room to let your fingers down, and I kicked the bucket out of the way and then just dropped it onto the floor. So that's out now. So we'll pull that out. Okay, so I've fixed the fuel level gauge into the new fuel tank. I've taken the gauze and the cap off the old fuel tank and fitted it into the new one. I've left the blanking plate on the top of the feeder, and I'm going to pop this one back in, even though I can see there's going to be a bit of welding required down here on this mount. 2 of them are pretty good. I'm going to put the fuel tank in, but I'm not going to probably use it actively. I'll just put it in and hold it in place, and then I'll get that welded at some point in the future. Okay, so I'm trying to put the new tank back in, even though the front mounts are a bit sketchy. I know I'm going to have to get them welded at some point, but I think they're the 2 on the edges are strong enough to hold the weight of the tank for now. I probably won't use it as the active fuel tank, so I won't load it up with heavy fuel. But I want to get the tank in, if only just to see how it goes on this side, and I'll do the other side, which should be a much more firm mount. I think I've got a suspicion the other side's a lot better condition. In true budget style, I'm using a bucket. I'm doing this on my own, so I've got no one to help me, so I'm using a bucket, and then I'm using one of the seats from the lightweight just to hold the tank up in place while I do the bolts up. So that's what I'm up to now. Okay, so the fuel tank's in. Got it on its new bolts. So I've cleaned up the fixing. The back mounting was absolutely fine, so there it is on its new bolt with its little rubber, I guess, vibration grommet thing. Sorry if I'm not a full mechanic. I couldn't use the top one because I couldn't get the thread to come through, but actually looking at it, maybe I could have got away with it, but I'm going to leave it like that because that's how it was when I found it. On the front, you can see the edge is not too bad of that mounting. The middle one is kind of rotting through, and then the one on the end is fine, but I've deemed it secure enough to hold the fuel tank for now, so it's pretty solid. It's well fixed in there, but I will get that done as a priority. So now I'm just looking at reconnecting the fuel tank. So I've reused the old screws because it didn't come with screws. I did buy a new fuel gauge arm, don't know what you call that, but it's the bit that reads the level of fuel with an arm on a sort of resistor. And then sends a current back to the dash so that you can see how much fuel's in the tank. That never worked before. I'm hoping it will work after this. And then for the feeder, it comes with a blanking plate and a piece of rubber, and I'm just cutting a hole in this piece of rubber to use it as effectively a gasket, because this one is just gone, absolutely peeled away. So I'm going to repurpose this as a gasket by pushing a hole through it with a Stanley knife, and I'm going to fix that back on. This we don't need anymore. So there we go, there's the rubber gasket that I've repurposed on the feeder, just screwed that in hand tight. I'm going to trust that those fuel lines are good and not too gunked up. If they are, they might have to be replaced, but I think they'll be good for now. And reconnected the fuel gauge, so all that remains now, apart from doing the other side, is to decant the fuel from the old tank into there, through a filter, and see if it starts.